Moving right along. Case in point, another quote. At a remote period, Egypt was divided into communities, the members of which claimed to be of one family and of the same seed, which under the matriarchate signifies the same mother blood and denotes the same mode of derivation on a more extended scale. Alright, pretty much the same thing we just talked about. Alright, moving right along. Another quote. So ancient was totemism in Egypt that the totems of the human mothers had become the signs of goddesses, in which the head of beast was blended with the figures of a human female, the totem of the human motherhood that was held to be divine, the motherhood in nature which was elemental in origin. So first they dealt with elemental forces, then they moved to zoo types, and later, in the end, came your anthropomorphic personifications of things where they actually took human form. Their deities actually took human form in your personification of the zoo types and the personification of the anthropomorphic renditions. Each time they personified, it was the woman being rendered first. Alright, moving right along. Some totems represented the food of certain districts. Some totems represented animals that were sacred to the region and wouldn't be eaten. The totem was originally the first of all eaten by the members of the group as their own as special food. Hence they were appointed its preserver and cultivators and were named after it. The totem primarily represented the maternal ancestor, the mother, who gave herself for food and was eaten, and who, as the mythical great mother in Egypt, was the goddess Hathor in the tree, the Renut, the serpent, who was flechified for eating as the totemic cow. Okay, so not only in these connotations is the mother a physical provider, but it's also looked upon as a metaphor for Mother Nature, period, as we talked about in the introduction to this whole thing. And it talks about how they arrived pretty much at these totems, how they arrived at these different things or whatever, how they would be linked to different animals or whatever, but the mother over the actual clan or whatever would be aligned with the specific animal that they were linked to. Okay, moving right along. Elements of nature preceded the zoo type. Totemism was a primitive means of distinguishing the offspring of one mother from the offspring of another, the children of the tree from the children of the rock, the hippopotamus, crocodile, etc. The earliest sociology touches on promiscuity at the point of departure from the human horde, when the mother was the only parent known. Okay. In the pre-totemic stage, there was one mother as the head of the family. Totemism, motherhood, is divided between two sisters, followed by two brothers. So even as we talked about in the intro, we were talking about the mitochondrial DNA. The mitochondrial DNA actually passing from mother to daughter to granddaughter and whatever have you. The descendancy, the physical descendancy, passed from mother to daughter. Okay, and all throughout this discourse, as we refer to this information laid out by Gerald Massey, we refer to, he used the word primitive, but I just want to everybody keep in mind that as far as when we talk about primitive from the root word prime, meaning first. So don't think of primitive as ooga booga, primitive caveman type thing or whatever. Think of primitive as prime or first. Okay. At a very early stage, the boys became consorts of their mother, the eldest being first. Incest was unknown. There is evidence that the eldest son was the earliest representative or outline of a father, and that he cohabited with his own mother on purpose to keep pure the mother blood. This is an African institution. The Queen of Cape, Gonzalez, and Gabon are accustomed to marry their oldest sons as a means of preserving pure royal blood. It was a very stringent law and custom with the Incas of Peru that the heir to the kingdom should marry his eldest sister. The genetrix, as typical woman, is both mother and consort to her own children. Okay, so this right here is breaking down as it pertains to the matriarchal system. They went through different measures to keep the blood pure, as opposed to the patriarchal system where men went out and freely kind of did their thing or whatever, and it was more a phallic connotation given to things or whatever. But in the connotation of the matriarchal system, the blood was kept pure, even to the point of a mother capitulating with her own children. And that's how you come upon the connotation of the virgin and the harlot. You know, as far as the harlot is concerned, the harlot is because the mother was considered the consort of her children, and the virgin because the virgin was an archetype. The virgin was more of a metaphor or whatever, due to the fact that the mother at one period of time was the only recognizable parent of the child. So every mother was considered as a virgin to a certain extent. It's not just something that came about with Christianity, but as we can see, as we talk about so-called mythology, we see certain deities depicted as being consorts of their mother. As we talk about, we take it to the biblical connotation, we talk about Nimrod. Okay, Nimrod is considered to be the husband of his mother, Semiramis. As we talk about the biblical Adam, if we go into the story that the biblical story Adam comes from, he had a wife prior to the biblical Eve, and that was Lilith. Okay, his mother was also named Lilith, so there we have that same connotation again. But just to quote this one more time, Gerald Massey lays down Soot or Setuk or Soot, the male hippo, was also both son and consort of the same first mother. Har, Soot, and Shu were described as consorts of their mother, yet there are 7 in all in mythology, and who reappear with the old harlot and partake of her cup of fornication in the book of Revelation. So just to kind of touch on that, in the book of Revelations, it gives the harlot gives birth to 7 kings, which were at the same time 7 heads of the solar dragon, and also 7 consorts who were born children of the old great mother. Her 7 children were the nature powers of our mythology. So that's also other connotations that are attributed to the patriarchal system. They also have their root in the matriarchal system, because it's that number 7 plus 1 is a common theme, and we can tie that into what later becomes the Ogdad, you know, the 8 deities, what have you, and you can also tie that into the 6 sons of Ta plus 1, meaning 7. But that ties into the matriarchal order of things. Moving right along, no girl was marriable until the rite of introcision had been performed. Okay, introcision. Okay, introcision is one of those tribal customs. Like I said, it goes back. A lot of these stories or a lot of these concepts, they're not recorded in written so-called history, or they're not dialogued in written documents. A lot of them are just recorded in the tribal customs of these people. So when we talk about certain customs like introcision is was a rite that was performed on a girl that reaches puberty. Okay, it's called the opening ceremony. What they did, they would take a stone knife and cut the perineum. The perineum is the space between the vaginal and the anal opening. They would cut that space with a stone knife and open it up a little bit to prepare the female to have intercourse, because in what's referred to in this book as pre-totemic times or whatever, it was a time of promiscuity, and there was no such thing as marriage. A female was, for lack of a better word, property, or she belonged to the whole tribe. So multiple individuals could have intercourse with a female. There was no marriage, and we see that in even in so-called Sumerian mythology, where you have Enki and Enlil. They have children by Ninti, their sister. I mean, it's only important figures really dealt with the marriage thing. It was no real marriage like that. Okay, moving right along. At first, no barrier of blood was recognized. The brothers and sisters of the same mother intermarried, although they were, or because they were originally of the same one blood. Okay, When the nations of the earth were all of one blood, it was the blood of the mother, who in her mystical aspect is the virgin mother of the mythos of Ishantology. Ishantology is these stories about how the world's going to end. But basically, as far as this, it's basically telling you that the only significant bloodline in your matriarchal system is the mother blood. That's how you determine royal descent. That's how you determine descendancy in the clan and everything like that. That is your royal blood. That is the only royal blood, the blood of the mother, and that's the only blood that's actually recognized. That's how we arrive at the concept of people being of one family and one clan or one group or whatever, because they all come from the same mother. They are all one flesh, as it's put. Okay, on being recognized as a woman, she is recognized by her zootype or totem. Thus, in myths, women change into beasts. Okay, moving right along. Another quote. At the coming of age, the girl changed into a lizard, a frog, or a serpent as a mode of indicating her status as a woman, whether in nature or in totemism. So she would assume the totem of the clan. Okay, and as we said before, the original totem of the clan, it is derived from the original mother of the clan. Whatever the totem of the clan was, for whatever purpose or whatever, that the original mother of the clan, she assumed that or whatever. So if it's the clan of the snake, she was the first snake. They gave birth to all the other snakes. Okay, so moving right along. The earliest human being individualized was necessarily the mother. She and her children formed the primal family, whose tie was that of blood, motherhood, a tie that must have been already common with the horde in pre-totemic times, the one blood of motherhood being the original source of all blood brotherhood. So, if there was no blood motherhood, there would not be a blood brotherhood, because again, the male brotherhood or whatever the case may be, it was secondary because the women ruled the clan. Your women, your mother of the clan was the head of the clan, and the descendancy passed down to the eldest daughter. So the eldest daughter was second in command, so to speak, for lack of a better terminology. Okay. The primary form of human personality was that attained by women under the matriarchate as mother. A woman was the mother ages earlier than she could be the wife. The child was known as hers from the beginning. Her function was that of breeder for the group and bearer for the tribe, and not for the love of an individual. Like we said prior to that, at a period of time they did everything for the group. As far as the woman, as far as the mother and everything like that, there was no such thing as marriage. I mean, all of the men, when a girl reached a certain age or whatever, when she had her right of intercision, whatever the case may be, in certain tribes or whatever, all the men would come in and kind of consummate that, for lack of a better word. All the men would come in and partake of that and make her a woman or whatever. So she was the only recognizable mother of the child and everything like that. It wasn't any one individual say, well, I love you or whatever the case may be, and he came and swept off her feet. That didn't exist at that period in time. That's a more modern innovation. Okay. When there was no individual fatherhood yet determinable, descent was in the female line from the mother to eldest daughter. These became the two women or the two mothers in totemism. Okay? Again, the only blood that mattered at that period of time in the matriarchate was the female, the mother's blood. Okay? If your mother was a lioness, the male offspring knew themselves as her young lions, etc. The mother was human beneath the totemic mask, but they were worn to distinguish one mother from another. Okay, so everybody starts off one blood, but as other females are born, they branch out into different clans and they assume different totemic titles, different totemic masks, but at the same time they still understood to be of one blood. Okay, in many mythologies it is said that certain beings came down to make the uniform beings from pre-totemic times into male and female of totemic times. Sound familiar? Sound like what we talked about in the introduction to this. Okay, totems of serpent and vulture were symbols of royal and divine maternity in Egypt. The most profoundly primitive of all the ancient mysteries was that of the mother blood. By this mystery it was determined that blood was the basis of womanhood, of motherhood, of childhood, and in short of human existence. Hence the customs instituted for its preservation and the purity of racial descent. Only the mother could originate and preserve the nobility of lineage or royalty of race. Okay, so in specifically he's talking about Egypt in this quote, but at the same time we cannot escape the fact that Egypt is in Africa. To truly understand Egypt, you have to understand African customs, and the same thing we were talking about with those zoo types or whatever. So the meaning, the meanings attributed to those zoo types are derived from African sources. It's other tribes in Africa that have the same meanings that the Egyptians attributed to those same zoo types or whatever, and that's where they get them from or whatever, because we have to remember Egypt is an important bullet point as far as African history is concerned, but it's not the first, it's not the oldest. There are many civilizations, many tribes or whatever that are far older than Egypt by thousands of years. Egypt is just an important landmark because it's a culmination of significant history, and it's a repository of significant history, but by far it's not the oldest or it's not the most significant. Moving right along. The mother blood was imagined as Niet, the vulture. The matriarchate was based on the mother blood. The salvation of the human race was affected by the blood of Isis. Salvation is perpetuation. So this goes into your concepts of the blood being a salvation and being washed in the blood and all this stuff like that as it pertains to like Christianity and stuff. These are not new concepts. A lot of your concepts that were taken or utilized in the patriarchal system, they have their origin in the matriarchal system, as we will soon see. Okay. The maiden who conceived and the bringer forth, these two mothers were imagined by the double Urius crown of maternity. Aset, the virgin mother, Nephthys, the bringer forth, a nurse of the child. The double divine mother, also the double sister. Okay? And that could also be correlated to the two Marys in the Bible. I mean, in a lot of your situations where you have two women figured in a lot of these stories or whatever, this is a lot of the symbolism that they're drawing this from. Okay, under the matriarchate, there could be no blood royal by derivation from the male. There was but one blood, that of the mother. Not only was it called the one blood, but the one flesh, one stock. It would be a way of preserving the mother blood in totemism for the brother and sister of the same totem to intermarry. Evidence points back to a time when the brother and sister of the same totem always married each other. These used to cohabit, and such intercourse was at one time considered to be not only natural and proper, but was esteemed as preferable. These were known in Africa and Australia as the one-legged people. These undivided, primitive, endogamous. Okay? Just like we just said, everybody was a one blood. The man's blood was actually irrelevant. Okay? And that's one of the reasons why that a brother and a sister, like we said before, could marry, because they were understood to be of the same family, and they were basically preserving the same genes. A lot was done to preserve that mother blood, like we were just saying when we spoke about the son actually cohabiting with the mother. All was done to preserve those same genes, and we kind of lost that as the patriarchal system kind of took over. We kind of lost a little bit of that. The mother eaten sacramentally was the earliest victim of blood sacrifice. In this great cruel rite, the body was eaten living to preserve the mother blood. Eating the mother was the primitive Eucharist, in which the mother was the host, whose flesh was torn in pieces like the latter bread, and whose blood was drunk religiously, as is the latter wine. So even like we were just talking about, a lot of your patriarchal practices and patriarchal rites are actually derived from matriarchal sources. All tribes didn't deal with human sacrifice and cannibalism and all that, but even the ones that did, the matriarchal system was such an influence in their culture that the mother was eaten sacramentally and that was the first victim of your blood sacrifice or whatever. And when we fast forward to the whole concept of Christianity and the Last Supper and everything like this is what they emulating in the Last Supper. The only difference is Jesus is breaking bread and they drinking wine, symbolic, emblematic of the blood. But as far as these tribes, some tribes that did actually deal with this human sacrifice and these blood rituals and things like that, they literally ate the mother, and to preserve the blood, or to pour the blood back into that clan. Okay, moving forward, another quote: "She was sacrificed comparatively young to preserve her from the effects of age, gray hairs, wrinkles from disease, decrepitude, and bodily decay.